Good evening. My name is Joseph Sipitz from the St. Joseph County Public Library, and it's time for another Saturday night story time for adults. We've got a two for today. The second one's a little grim, so we're going to lighten up with the first one. A reading from the Field Guide to Dumb Birds of North America by Matt Crack, published by Chronicle Books. And our particular bird that we're going to insult today is actually our cover bird. See? Yeah? He is the white-breasted butt nugget. You may know this particular one is the white-breasted nuthatch. All right, so let me begin. An easy way to identify this dumb nuthatch is to look for the bird in your backyard that spends most of its time upside down. Its diet should include insects and acorns, but this bird is a sucker for free food, so it spends a lot of its time industriously carrying sunflower seeds away from your backyard bird feeder to hide them in random crevices for shame eating later when nobody is watching. Random bird note, their nasal calls are a familiar irritation on winter mornings across most of North America. Okay, our second story is from the American Folklore, Treasury of American Folklore, published in 1961, and this particular story is called Room for One More. And this is a tale that's told in virtually any city in the 1950s or before who has elevators, and this particular version is written by publisher Bennett Cerf. When an intelligent, comely girl of 20-odd summers was invited for the first time to the Carolina estate of some distant relatives, the lovely plantation fulfilled her fondest expectations. She was given a room in the West Wing, and she prepared to retire for the night with the glow of satisfaction. Her room was drenched in the light of a full moon. Just as she was climbing into bed, she was startled by the sound of horses' hooves on the gravel roadway. Curious, she walked over to the window and saw, to her astonishment, a magnificent old coach pull up to an abrupt stop directly below her. The coachman jumped from his perch, looked up, and pointed a long, bony finger at her. He was hideous. His face was chalk white. A deep scar ran the length of his left cheek. His nose was beaked. As he pointed at her, he droned in deep tones. "There is room for one more." Then, as she recoiled in terror, the coach, the horses, and the ominous coachman disappeared completely. The girl slept very little, but the next day she was able to convince herself that she had merely had a nightmare. The next night, however, the horrible experience was repeated. The same coach drove up the roadway. The same coachman pointed at her and intoned, "There is room for one more." Then, as before, the entire coach disappeared. The girl now was panic-stricken. She could scarcely wait for the morning. She ran up for some excuse to her hosts and left immediately for home. Upon arrival, she taxied to her doctor from the station and told him the story in tremulous tones. The doctor persuaded her that she had been the victim of a peculiar hallucination. He laughed at her in terror, and she departed in a state of infinite relief. As she rang for the elevator, its door swung open before her. The elevator was very crowded. But as she was about to squeeze her way inside, a familiar voice rang in her ear. "There is room for one more." In terror, she stared at the operator. He was the coachman who had pointed at her. She saw his chalk-white face, the livid scar, the beaked nose. She drew back and screamed. The elevator door banged shut. A moment later, the building shook with a terrible crash, and the elevator had gone on without her. It broke loose from its cables and plunged 18 stories to the ground, and everybody in it, of course, was crushed to a pulp. And so it goes. Okay. Very good. We'll have more stories on following Saturdays. Look for you then. Hope to see you in the branch whenever it is possible. Good evening.